All right, let's kick this off. Good day, everyone. I hope all you and yours are safe and healthy. I'm Sumit, your host for the day, and I have the privilege to run our cable media and entertainment business here in North America. Through the Women in Leadership series, we celebrate and spread empowerment. It gives me a great pleasure and a deep sense of honor to have such a special panel we have on our show today. I'm excited to have these eminent guests and looking forward to hearing from them. Or, in the words of a gamer, I am super hyped. Thank you, Katie, Karla, and Leanne, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
From initiatives like Nanhi Kali, empowering the girl child through education, to a flagship career development program where stars are identified called Female Achievers in Making, the inspiring women have always just been around the corner for us at Tech Mahindra. I'm sure you won't be surprised if I told you that out of hundreds of volunteers currently providing relief and support to many, many families currently affected by COVID 19 in India, over 79% are women. A part of our audience today is from India. COVID 19 has taken an unexpected turn with a huge rise in the number of infected and deceased. Many of us have lost our loved ones due to unavailability of oxygen or hospital beds or information. We at Tech Mahindra are actively working 24/7 with rapid access teams and exclusive COVID 19 helplines to support as much as we can. But you can do your bit too. Please stay indoors and contribute to any relief fund that you feel comfortable. Every bit helps. I hope the situation improves as quickly as it emerged, and we pray for healthy recovery of all affected. We also hope that events and webinars like these will keep us positive and motivated through these hard times. So, we welcome you to the second episode of season 2 of our webinar series, directed and produced by the most exciting business at Tech Mahindra, the cable media and entertainment business, where we offer experience, technology, and engineering solutions from glass to glass through innovative people such as Debbie, Ashmeet, Ashwini, products, platforms, and many, many possibilities. I believe we can all agree that the pandemic has redefined the way we perceive gaming. It has managed to become the glue that helped people stay connected in the times of social distancing and has managed to entertain countless people through the quarantine era. We saw a huge spike in the number of players and huge upgrade of equipment with the launch of new gaming consoles. Games like Fortnite, League of Legends, Final Fantasy have been the hype of the generation, and we even saw a massive transition towards mobile and cloud gaming. It's safe to say that the industry has victory royals and big dubs, big wins, in store for all of us in the coming future. Today, we will learn about the exhilarating journey of our amazing panelists through the world of gaming, and will also explore what the gaming industry has been up to. Without any further delays, let's kick off the session with Tech Mahindra's fearless and fabulous Debbie Menin.
I love the fearless and fabulous. Well, thank you, Sumit. And I want to introduce this fabulous group of women and tell you a little bit more about Katie, Leanne, and Karla as people. We'd also like to talk a little bit about the industry and then also find out a little bit more about what gaming for good really means. That's the topic of our session today. So we'll break it down into two sections. One is really about them. The other is about the industry. It promises to be all inspiring. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the inspiring Katie Canelo. She's a senior manager of IT at Epic Games, and her free time, I love this, she chases around her kids, their chickens, and a random horse. I'd love to hear more about the horse. Random horse. And puttering around her tiny garden, she's hoping not to destroy. So Katie, would you tell us a little bit about your role at Epic Games and Hear about your garden or your random horse.
Awesome. Sure. So I'm one of the behind the scenes leads at Epic. So my job and my teams support the operations. They give the devs the ability to create the amazing content and games that you all see. I currently run global IT support, operations, production, information architecture, IT site expansion work, and I also work on mergers and acquisitions. So obviously I'm not busy, wearing lots of hats. And then, my random chicken is my random horse. We have the world's most klutzy and most ridiculous animals ever. They manage to hurt themselves and fall over things all the time. And my garden is doing okay. During the pandemic, obviously we've been shut down for over a year or so. Tried my hand at the garden. Not going to feed a whole neighborhood with it, but we're still trying.
Good for you. Well, such a pleasure to meet you. We'd also like to introduce you to the fabulous Karla Reyes. She was named one of the top 100 women in gaming by She Plays Games, a podcast that celebrates women in games and has been featured on, get this, Forbes list in 2021 as one of the top 30 under 30. That's fabulous. So, Karla, want to tell us a little bit about you and maybe your favorite game?
Sure, yeah. So I'm the head of business development at Code Coven, which is a global games industry accelerator for underrepresented talent, and most recently a product manager at Square Enix, where I co-founded an employee resource group called Square Enix Red, which was all about exploring racial and ethnic diversity within the games content that we create. So really passionate about diversity and inclusion, as well as games for good, and just the theme of this whole session. So looking forward to discussing that today. In terms of the games that I enjoy playing, I really enjoy narrative-driven games, RPGs, MMOs, any games that encourage open world exploration or being able to improve collaboration skills with other players, and just fostering empathy and exploring that.
Terrific. Well, we're very happy to have you on board. Last but not least, we are honored to introduce the head of studio and executive producer of Riot Games, Leanne Loombe. She is the brain behind Need for Speed. Okay, now that's my middle name. She's a lady who loves cars and games, passionate about being an ambassador for women in games, and focuses on encouraging women in the industry. We love that. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about what you do at Riot Games?
Yeah, so thanks for that introduction. I head up Riot Forge, which is our third-party publishing division at Riot Games. So what that means is we work with a bunch of external developers, really amazing indie developers, to make League of Legends games. So we have a variety of games in production at the moment. We've already announced our first 2 games, which was Rune King and Convergence, both working with Airship Syndicate and Double Stallion, both amazing studios. And my role, as you mentioned, is head of that division, head of that Riot Forge studio. So I'm responsible for making sure our studios have everything that they need to be set up for success and make great games. And then the internal studio at Riot on Riot Forge, making sure that they have everything that they need and can work together and understand what games we're making and who we're making them for, so that we can get awesome games out to our players. So I'm responsible for the strategy for Riot Forge and also our portfolio, and then the production kind of holistically across all of our games. So very excited about some of the games that we're making, because they're for a very different type of audience. Riot Games is obviously, our DNA is online competitive multiplayer games, with the MOBA, with Valorant, with Wild Rift. For Riot Forge, we're kind of working on the opposite end of that scale and making single player kind of story driven experiences. So very different way to experience the League of Legends universe, which I think will be very exciting for players. And then, as you mentioned, in my spare time, I love cars. I joke with my mum, because I don't have children, but I say that my children are my cars, because I have 3 cars and they're the grandchildren that she will get. So she hasn't met 2 of them yet. So that's definitely on the horizon. But yeah, I definitely love cars, and they're a big part of my life.
We'll have to tell you sometime. Tech Mahindra owns Pininfarina. Pininfarina, yeah. One of the most famous car design companies. It's 90 years old. They did
Amazing.
Ferrari and Maserati, and anyway, they do a lot of cars that were in Formula One racing. So it'll be a good conversation sometime.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. Glad you're here. Let's get into the session. And I think the best way to do that is to learn a little bit more about each one of you. So today's session is around, gaming for good. And if you hear my little background, I literally can't stop them. So this session is May the Force be for good, which brings me to Katie. Okay, that statement has a lot of, hold on one second. Hey. All right, maybe that'll help. Katie, this statement has a lot of different perspectives. If you think about it, may the force be good, but do tell us what you think today about that word force.
I think today, and I guess all three of us kind of start out expressing our support for India and the force behind sending you guys light and love. We know the pandemic has hit the country hard, and we cannot imagine what the pain and suffering is that you guys are all experiencing. So we did want to make sure that you guys know we are sending all of our light and love to you at this point.
Thank you. We'll take it. Not just us, but everybody around the world. But India right now is really suffering. Okay, so let's talk about the topic of may the force that is with you be for good. Think about that for a minute. And Katie, from a career perspective, what does that mean for you?
So it's not only from a career perspective, but I would say from a personal and professional side too. So when you leave, you kind of want everything that you have touched. You want the state to be better than what it was when you got there. Again, applies to not only your professional life, but your personal life. We have a very limited time on this earth to make an impact on people and events around us. And my job is to make sure that impact is as positive as possible.
Great. So Leanne, do you want to pivot and tell us what that phrase means to you?
Yeah, when I think about, the force in my life, the thing that comes to mind is perseverance. That's something that I've kind of lived by throughout, again, same as Katie, like my professional and my personal life. It's kind of that special source for me that I, keep going back to is that mentality of perseverance. I think it's you can't give up. You have to know what you want all the time, and you have to be able to see that dream to be able to achieve it. And so persevering through all the challenges and the roadblocks and the ups and downs that life inevitably gives us, I think is really, really important, especially in times like today, in the last year and a half that we've been through. I think everybody's experienced a lot of different challenges, both personally and professionally. And I think perseverance is really important for us to be able to continue to work towards that dream or work towards that goal. And that's really come from a couple of places from me. Firstly, from my mother, definitely like a very key icon in my life. And then also from a woman called Dawn Steele, who was one of the first women to head up a production company. And I really look to people like that that have accomplished the impossible almost through perseverance and understanding, how that can be applied in my life.
We'll have some more questions about Dawn, because I'd love to hear why she and your mother are so important to you. But it's interesting. We're talking about this word perseverance, and she said it's not something you can learn, it's something you have. And it sounded like your mother really inspired you to have more perseverance in your life. And did you say it had something to do with maybe losing your father at a young age?
Yeah, so my mum was a single parent for me and my sister for most of our childhood. And, she also had a full-time job as a nurse. So she, had to juggle all of those things. And I grew up seeing her overcome those challenges and understanding how to be both a single mother and then also hold down a, full-time, very, robust career and be successful in that career. And obviously, losing a parent early on and having just my sister and my mother, you have to learn to sort of, overcome those challenges. So I think you do learn from nurture and from nature, right? To to some of these, you know, personality traits that we grow as we go through our childhood and into adulthood. That comes from nature for sure. Like parts of us are that way, but also through nurture, and being able to see my mother behave in that way and act in that way and see some of the ways that she overcome the challenges is just very inspiring for me, and definitely gives me the strength to do the same thing, especially in a very, you know, male orientated industry. And I've been making games 18 years, so I've been, you know, back then it was there was way less women in the industry, and it's I'm happy that we are progressing and getting better and better. But you know, back then it was more like 1 or 2% of the studio was women. So
Wow, good for you.
it's just, you know, you have to persevere when you're a minority, but it's definitely worth it because we're paving the way for all those other people to join as well.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Karla, we actually have you to thank. You're the one who came up with the whole theme for the topic today. So obviously this word force really resonates with you. Would you mind talking a little bit about why that is the case?
Sure. When I think about the word force, I think about intrinsic motivations or passions or a value system. And for me, it's really been about this concept of paying forward and paying back because so my background, my parents are immigrants from Guatemala and the Philippines, and I grew up in a low income scenario, but was very fortunate to have been granted scholarship opportunities, which gave me access to social and economic mobility and helped me launch my academic and professional careers. So I never really take that for granted, and I always want to be able to pay back to people who've supported me along the way, but also be able to empower and uplift other people who come from underrepresented backgrounds. And that's something that I've been doing actively at Code Coven, as well as through my work at Square Enix with Red, just thinking about how we can acquire and retain more diverse talent within the industry, not just within the industry as developers, but also within the content that's created to be able to serve the audiences as well.
Well, just kind of a second part of that, you know, thinking about your force, which is your passion, you have a big passion to support a positive social impact, right? And when we talked the other day, we both realized we're first generation American. This conversation led me to believe that there really is more to your story. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background and how it helped you develop your interest in making an impact?
Yeah, so as I said, since my parents both come from developing countries, being the Philippines and Guatemala, and I still have family there and spent a lot of time there, and I grew up in New York City, so a very multicultural place where I had access to seeing the diversity and discrepancies between different socioeconomic groups and demographic groups. So I always thought that how can I support people who don't have access to the opportunities when I'm somebody who has had access to those opportunities, and not just from the economic standpoint, but yeah, in general, I think I also grew up in a sort of Catholic environment, and there was all of this humanitarian work and volunteer work that was instilled in me from a young age, and that's something that I've continued to carry forward with me throughout my personal and professional life. And I always want to be able to think more globally and think about what are the ways in which I can problem solve in any aspect of my life and support and empower people.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. You know, one of the joys that I get when I talk to these panelists before the session is I find golden nuggets out of each one of them. And Katie had an interesting quote that she loves, and it's if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. That quote actually was authored by Shirley Chisholm, who was the first Black woman elected to the U.S. Congress. And there's something about that quote specifically that stayed with her and resonated. I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I heard the quote. I was actually attending an award ceremony for our CTO at the time when I was working in ed tech. And I was attending as a guest. He was one of my mentors. He remains one of my mentors today. But I remember looking around the room and seeing all of these men winning awards for CTO of the year. And it was this with the bank companies and ed tech companies and everything else. And everybody had their theme music and they'd walk up to the stage. They're like, I'd like to thank my family and everybody else. And, it was powerful and it resonated, but it didn't really hit me until I saw one of the females who was also a CTO of a company nearby. You know, when she was announced as the winner of her award, she got up, she walked to the podium like she owned the room, you know, without being, you know, the whole room was just watching her. She walked up and she gave her speech and she thanked her mom, like we all should. Hi, mom, by the way, she's listening. And, you know, she said for the women in the room, and she said for the minorities in the room, she said, if she said the quote, she said, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring your own chair. And from that point forward, for me, I stopped in my career waiting for people to give me an opportunity to do something and started pursuing my own opportunities. If something came up that needed to be fixed, we went after it. If we had a process or procedure that wasn't in place, we started pursuing those. You know, have we always been successful? No, but that always stays in the back of my mind when I start losing motivation or losing hope or whatever it is. I'm like, okay, let me go get my chair. Let me go find people and we'll figure out what we're doing next.
Oh, that's great. I'm just hoping that some of these words of wisdom today will inspire the rest of us. That's fantastic. So Leanne, you told me you've got a favorite quote that resonates with you. It's something, if you can't get in the front door, how does it go?
Yeah, so it's actually a similar vibe to Katie, to be honest, because it is about, you know, finding your own opportunities and like seizing that moment. But again, it's from, you know, Dawn Steele. And basically what she says is if they won't let you in the front door, try the back door. If they won't let you in the back door, try the side door. If you can't get in the side door, go through the window and find your way in. So I just really love that because it's, you know, sometimes we don't get the seat at the table, or sometimes we don't get the option to walk through the front door. And that's okay, because there's other ways to get in. You know, there are other ways to find that opportunity, and there are other ways to make sure our voice is heard. And I think it's, you know, we just need to find those opportunities, and we need to find the way into, you know, whether it's the meeting room, whether it's into a company or a job, or even just like something that you're passionate about. You know, and I think that connects back to my perseverance piece as well. Like that, and the perseverance in that quote, you know, just so special to me, because anytime, kind of like Katie, right, when you think about, I need to get this opportunity, or this is what I'm kind of working towards, I think, okay, I need to persevere. I need to get through these challenges. I need to look at the landscape in front of me. I need to either bring my own folding chair, or I need to go through the window. And I need to, you know, fight to make that happen, because that's ultimately what we're here for, is to have our voice.
Leanne, by the way, we're going to have built an entire house and furnished it with everything that we're doing.
Exactly.
And Karla's coming with us.
You know, what you're reminding me of is giving yourself permission, right? Don't wait for it. Just give yourself permission.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
that's a good story. All right, Karla, we're going to pick on you for a minute. I love this, and it's probably going to make you a little uncomfortable. Forbes list of 30 under 30. Okay, so I talked to her about that, and her response was, oh, I don't know, but some people nominated me. You know, and I said, are you kidding me? People don't go out of their way to nominate anybody for an award. Trust me, they're doing it because they're inspired. So I was just wondering if you could take a minute, take this on, and give us an example of why you think they were inspired to nominate you.
Oh gosh, I think honestly in the last couple of years, because I'm actually still fairly nascent in my career within games, but what's driven me so much, and I think partially because of how I entered the games industry, was that I was fortunate to have started volunteering for an organization called Bayman Games in the UK, which specifically supports people from underrepresented backgrounds, racial and ethnic underrepresented backgrounds, and that gave me a community that was already supportive, which I know is not always the case for other people who are trying to break into the industry. So I definitely felt like I was in a very fortunate position. But therefore, as going back to what I was saying earlier about paying back and paying forward, because people were mentoring me and supporting me, I wanted to make sure that the moment that I had the privilege and platform to be able to reciprocate that or make a broader impact, that's what I wanted to do. And so mostly everything that I've been doing in the industry to date has been really focused on trying to drive social impact and a lot of the diversity and inclusion aspects as well, because that was how I entered. And I've been doing a lot of work with Code Coven, for example. Just in the last year, this time last year, we wanted to be able to create an internship opportunity for students and recent graduates whose career opportunities had been canceled due to the pandemic. And there were only 3 of us at the time, and we realized that we needed to raise a lot of money to be able to facilitate this program. So we hustled a lot, and we were able to launch this program that the graduates actually were able to go on to self-publish their own games, negotiate deals with publishers, or even get hired by our sponsor studios. And we are actually now launching another accelerator program this year in partnership with Facebook Gaming, but the whole organization has scaled quite a lot. Leanne has been a mentor and supporter of, and it's been amazing. We're so privileged to be able to collaborate with Leanne and her team. And I think that, in addition to some of the stuff at Square Enix with the Red Group and what I've been trying to do, probably that's how people have come to nominate me, just because it's been in such a short time frame.
Well, congratulations. It's really terrific. I love that.
I just will quickly say, like, working with Karla and the Code Coven team, I understand why you were nominated, because I think that program and that initiative with Tara has just been so impactful for the industry, because we haven't had things like this before. And I think COVID has kind of made us think outside the box a little bit about, okay, how can we still, get together as people, and how can we help each other? And I found the program just so beneficial. I mentored a couple of the teams on there, and they're just so appreciative to get this opportunity that didn't exist before. 10 years ago, things like this didn't exist. So I just want to give a huge shout out to Karla and the Code Coven team and Tara, because I think that program is just, what we should be doing more of in the industry, being able to use that as an on-ramp for, diversity and minorities to be able to make games.
Well, thank you, Leanne. All right. Actually, I can see somebody wrote in a question that I wanted to ask you. Colleen Shelberg had just said, it seems like this profession isn't one that is mainstream, but she wanted to know if you could actually major in gaming. It sounded like you could.
Yes, you can. You couldn't back in the day, but you definitely can now. You can do all sorts of courses on computer video games, whether it's design, production. You can do masters now in video game analytics. You can get very, very specific now. So if there's a certain passion that you have, excuse me, whether that's art or data or analytics, like there is now a video game course for many of those elements in games. I think the key thing to remember is that making games is there are so many people that come together to make a game. I mean, you can just see that through Katie, Karla, and Mai's position. You've got IT, you've got production, you've got marketing, you've got art and engineering. It's a vast amount of people that actually come together to make a video game. So there's a huge amount of opportunities to, look at what might suit your skills.
Oh, great. Well, Katie, I want to talk to you a little bit about mentoring. Now, I know that it's really a part of your force of nature. And I think you had said that you had people that put you in a place where you didn't think you belonged. They put you in that position. Could you tell us what position they put you in, and why it made you feel uncomfortable, why it made you grow, and how it helped you get into mentoring?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came up through the tech realm. I started out my career as a technician at Apple, then moved up into the ed tech field doing the same thing as IT support. And at one point, my boss at the time was promoted into a director spot, and it left a management spot open. And I remember he called me into his office and said, "Hey, congratulations, you're now the manager of IT." I'm going, okay, that's great. I've never been a manager or lead before. So, high five, let's figure this out. And I was immediately thrown into leadership opportunities. So, I was added to senior leadership meetings that I felt like I didn't know what I was talking about. Like, what am I doing here? They would talk about strategy and long-term company vision, employee reviews, and things that I thought at the time that I had no clue about. And I remember questioning my manager, and I remember questioning his lead at the time, going, guys, like, what am I doing here? I feel like I have nothing to contribute. I'm listening, I'm taking notes, I'm absorbing, but like, I can't give anything back. And both of them at the time, were just like, just listen, take in what you can, Like, we want you to learn how to be an effective leader. And looking back, what they were doing was prepping me for what they, and I obviously down the road, was going to be doing, you know, in my career. So they recognized something in me that made them push me harder than I would have pushed myself at the time. And in turn, you know, I took that and I did rise to the occasion. You know, I moved into senior management roles at the last company and now with Epic Games. And now it's my turn to take that same experience and opportunity and give that to people who may not recognize the talent in themselves. So I want them to see the same thing that my mentors at the time saw in me, and I want to elevate them to the levels that they can and will be capable of. And especially in the technology industry, you tend to have people leads and you have technical leads, and my skill set really falls in the people lead side and making sure I can elevate people into the career and the path that they want. And it all boils down to, you know, being given the opportunity to do that myself, and now taking that and being able to offer everybody else that I work with, the people that work for me and with me, the same opportunity.
Love it. Love it. All right. I'm going to go back to Leanne for just a minute. You were talking about Dawn Steele. I know who Dawn Steele is, but what I remember about her is people called her the Queen of Mean. I'm just wondering, why would they put that kind of connotation on some famous film producer? Can you tell us a little bit about why they did that and why she's such a mentor or a hero of yours?
Yeah, I think, you know, especially working in an industry as a minority, sometimes you have to find people that have already broken in and done the thing that you're trying to do, you know, because then it's inspiring. You're like, oh, someone else has done this, so it will definitely be possible for me. And although Dawn Steele was in a, you know, slightly different industry, she was in TV and film. It's still entertainment, so it's still, you know, a very similar process that we go through from a creative and a technical aspect. And the thing that Dawn Steele did was, you know, she started at Paramount Pictures. She worked on some, you know, very famous movies. She's responsible for Top Gun, for example, and Cool Runnings, like some very, you know, instrumental movies to the industry. And then she became the first female president of a whole entire production company, which was Columbia Pictures. So first, you know, woman to head up a whole entire picture studio, which, you know, was a huge thing back in, you know, the 80s. So her story really inspires me because she came from selling like merchandise. She came from like writing as a sports writer for, you know, the NFL. Very diverse career, very, you know, interesting journey that she's taken. But ultimately, you know, she worked hard and she proved herself, and she had a really great work ethic. But there is definitely something in male orientated industries, and also just from a stereotypical perspective, that I think some women that are assertive and decisive and kind of know what they want in life are sometimes perceived as aggressive or bossy. And that's definitely something that has been scientifically proven as well. There's been a lot of, you know, scientific experiments about how people perceive female behaviors versus male behaviors. And when a male is, you know, decisive and knows what he wants, it's definitely perceived as, oh, you know, he's strong and he's making a decision. This is great. I can follow him. When a woman does a similar thing, it can be perceived as aggressive or bossy or mean. And that's essentially where Dawn Steele got this perception from, because she was a very powerful woman in the industry. She knew what it meant to make great movies, and she was not afraid to make decisions. She also kind of broke the ceiling a little bit by hiring a lot of female executives. She was very focused on hiring women producers, women directors, women in marketing, and that was seen as very strange at the time. And so a lot of people were threatened by her and didn't quite understand, you know, what a powerful woman in this type of position was meant to act like. And so that's where the, you know, the comments like Queen of Mean or Dawn Steele, you know, like using her name to kind of, you know, bully her to some extent because she was decisive and powerful. But I kind of look at that as, you know, she did pave the way for a lot of other women because, you know, she created these opportunities for other women to be in the entertainment industry. And so when you think about the trade-off of being called Queen of Mean and then the things she succeeded, I think that trade-off's probably worth it.
You know what I think today it'd be different. I don't think she'd have the connotation of Queen of Mean if it was today. It was just
Agreed. I think
she pioneered a whole industry back then.
Exactly. She was pioneering it. And like I said, people didn't quite know what it meant to have a woman heading up a whole entire production company, you know. And so I think we've progressed massively these days, you know, definitely not the same perceptions. However, some of those stereotypical thoughts still exist because of how we've grown up, right? Because of society. There are definitely still some elements of that lingering. But I am happy that we are progressing, especially in the games industry. I've seen it progress over the last like 18 years to a much more positive and balanced place. We still have a lot of work to do, but I can definitely see the improvements that have happened.
Great. Well, thanks. Hey, Karla, I want to talk to you about education and continuing education. So you had your undergraduate degree from St. Andrews. Of course, I needed to know if she met the prince or princess, but she's continued to evolve her education in a high degree, that was a pun, and it was intended, of interest in expanding, I love this, technical literacy. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about this subject and why you would recommend that people go to ongoing, you know, courses and classes, and how do you find them?
Yeah, well, since we work in a technology space, it's rapidly evolving and it's very difficult to keep up. And the games industry especially is so vast and nuanced. There are so many niches that you could explore. And something that I've always tried to do within my career since I've been working in tech has been to, as I mentioned to you, increase my technical literacy, because I didn't come from a technical degree. My degree is actually in management, but as a product manager, I interact with engineers on a daily basis, and I really wanted to be able to speak their language. So I did software engineering boot camps, and there are many that are, you know, running remote programs online, and there are scholarship opportunities. Sometimes they can be quite an investment, but you know, I would recommend them. And then Code Coven as well, because Code Coven's offering, I actually participated in their Unity pilot development bootcamp, and that was where I shifted not just from learning, you know, web development, but also learning how to develop games. And it was fun to create personal projects. And even though I'm not a programmer by trade, it's been very useful in my games industry career. So I would always encourage, you know, anyone to just use the vast available resources online. There are tons of YouTube tutorials and free online resources. And then if you really want to go beyond any threshold, if you're struggling, it's always great to explore some more intensive bootcamp type of programs. It's definitely been worth it for me, and yeah, I think it would be. We're seeing it from our graduates at Code Coven, for example. It's a very worthy investment of time.
Thanks for the inspiration. All right, Katie, I wanted to talk about the pandemic this year. And also, by the way, I'm going to switch into more industry conversations. And if we have a chance to get back to more of the personal conversations, we will. Plus, we've got a lot of questions, I guess, from the audience here. But regarding the pandemic this year, we know that there's been a large surge in gaming. It's also a kind of a newfound societal appreciation for gaming this year. So knowing that the gaming industry has gone up by 40% over this last year, that's unbelievable. People found that games relieve stress. That makes sense. It means, you know, personal interactions, remote connectivity. But really the question is, do you think that it'll drop after life starts back to becoming normal? And I'm not sure life will ever be completely normal.
Depends on your definition of normal.
Yeah, the new norm. But you know, it's dropped a little bit already in the US and the UK, and we're just wondering if you think that the gaming industry will stay on the pace of, you know, upward mobility.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And to answer that, I have to back up a little bit. So my family, we got our first gaming system back in, I think it was 1987 or 88. I can't remember. But I remember my dad walking through the door with a large Nintendo box and setting it up, and we all immediately were hooked, you know. And since then we've had the gamut of systems. We've had the Atari, we've had the PlayStation, we have the Switch, we have the Xbox. And now my kids are playing the same games and same systems that I was playing 30 plus years ago. And over these last 30 years, since obviously since we got the Nintendo and before that, the industry has ebbed and flowed. And while the COVID period has seen that huge surge in device usage and popularity, it is inevitably going to decrease a little as life returns to, the new normal. Kids are back in school, parents are back in work, and outside the home activities are starting to resume. But this decrease doesn't just apply to gaming, but just time on devices spent in general. However, this is what our industry expects. Not only do we expect this, but we capitalize on it. This is our opportunity to rise to the occasion and give people reasons to come back. Games will be updated. Characters will get new storylines and skins. Graphics will become more crystal clear. Game performance will increase. And that's because we are constantly innovating. Not only that, but our industry is constantly expanding. For Epic in particular, our vision moves way past games and Fortnite in general, although you would never convince my two nephews of that, and into what we can create with the game foundations. We're already using the Unreal Engine in the media and entertainment industry. If you've seen The Mandalorian, you've seen the engine in action. And we're entering into the metaverse realm with the MetaHuman creator, being able to create any character you could possibly dream up. The social experiences created in Fortnite with concerts and movie premieres. So gaming today, regardless of what's happening right now and the trends, currently we're experiencing, is going to look very different 10 years. And our job in this gaming industry and in our positions is to help drive the way that looks.
That's a great answer. Thank you. And did you see how she spoke with such passion? I love it.
We get very passionate about our games and our industry and the engine. So.
Good. Leanne, I think it would be really terrific to hear a little bit about the life cycle of the gaming industry. Okay, so someone comes up with an idea and it goes through an entire process and it's published, it's promoted, it's distributed to the masses. Could you just take a minute and walk us through that process? So I guess part of what I'd love to know more about is there a, from an idea standpoint, a need that they want to fill based on research, or is it just somebody's creative outlet that they think this is just going to be a great game?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and probably one we could spend, a couple of hours on, because making games is very complex. But just to try and answer that, a little bit more simply, everything does come from an idea for sure, but the way that I, generally look at coming up with ideas, even in games, but other creative mediums as well. I think there's two ways to look at coming up with an idea. I think the first one is, what problem are you trying to solve? Sometimes as humans, as we experience day-to-day life, we encounter problems. That's where, innovations like Uber came from, and innovations like DoorDash and stuff. Like, people are seeing a problem in life where, they're lacking some convenience, or, they're not able to get taxis as frequently. And so an opportunity arises because we experience a problem in life. And that's the same with gaming. If you playing a lot of games, obviously as game makers, we have to play a lot of games, and we're all passionate about doing that, so it's fun anyway. But we generally, look at the market, we're playing a lot of games, and we understand what players, are experiencing. And based on that, we can see players experiencing a certain problem and then come up with an idea that solves that problem. The other way to look at it is, if there isn't a problem that already exists, there might be an opportunity or a gap that can be filled. And that's another way to come up with an idea. So, as a gamer, if you're like, oh my God, I wish I just had a game that would do X, that's seeing an opportunity and trying to fulfill a gap that just doesn't exist in the market right now. So I think ideas really come from, those two places, whether it's trying to fulfill an opportunity that someone hasn't even created yet. It doesn't exist yet. It's something new and fresh and innovative. Or you're trying to solve a problem that you've personally experienced or you've seen players experience, and you have a solution to that problem. And so that's generally where ideas will come from. And then what we do with that is, like you mentioned, a lot of research. We definitely have to take a look at what players want, player behavior, what's happening in the market, and to really try and validate that problem that we think exists, or validate that opportunity that we feel that is going to be exciting for players to experience. So that's really how I personally look at idea generation. And obviously there's many other ways to approach that, but generally those two buckets kind of capture a lot of different ideas. And then once you have the idea, I think what's really important is three questions that I always kind of think about game development is: what are we making? Who are we making it for? And most importantly, why do they care? You really have to tap into why this thing is important, why this idea is important, why this idea is going to be amazing, and really answer that question. Because if you don't have a specific target audience and you don't understand why that target audience is even going to care about this particular game, then you're not going to be successful. That's really just setting yourself up for failure. So I think that initial concept phase is really, really important, because that's where you really try and validate why you're even making this game in the first place, or making this, experience in the first place, and who you're making it for. And then you can really dig into the details of what that particular game is. But in a nutshell, like, game development does go through that concept phase. That's the idea generation. That's, when you're figuring out who you're making it for and why you're making it. And then once you've kind of got all of that foundational work, that's when you move on to the prototype phase. That's where you really try and validate all of that research and all that paperwork you've done and all that idea generation, and try and validate that in an actual working game, like a working prototype. And that's where you can, ask all the different questions and figure out how game mechanics work and all of that type of stuff. And then once you're happy with that, that's when you move on to production. And then many, many, many more things.
Yeah. I think that, like you said, that's more than an hour webinar at the top.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
You know what, I think you just inspired a lot of people there, from just the ideation standpoint and the research that goes behind it to make sure there is a need. Sometimes I look at it from the film industry, where people, write a script, they create a movie. They're not necessarily thinking about filling a need. They just have a creative outlet. And I just wondered what the difference was with gaming. So that was really interesting. Thank you. I'm going to move on to mobile gaming, versus PC and console. So Karla, one of the trends, obviously, that disrupted the industry is really the increase in mobile users. What I heard was 50% of the revenues are now out of the mobile gaming world. That's amazing. So games like Fortnite, Final Fantasy, League of Legends are about to launch in mobile. But these companies have clearly aligned their goals and shifting their priorities, obviously per this trend, which makes sense, right? But do you further anticipate more mobile gaming, and what kind of impact do you think it'll actually make? If you have any examples, feel free to talk about them. And if I didn't say this was for Karla, I'll say it now.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because traditional hardcore gamers sometimes have this negative perception of mobile. But one of the biggest arguments for mobile games is its accessibility, right? There are over 3 billion people globally with smartphones, and that number is only increasing. And when you think about reaching audiences outside of what we call the tier 1 markets, which are primarily the Western markets, that everybody's really on mobile. They might not have access to consoles. And so trying to reach these audiences is the only way to expand and bring these immersive experiences to a wider audience. And in terms of the power of mobile and where that's headed from a technological standpoint, you think about trends like 5G. And of course, I understand there's a controversy behind it, but it still is being implemented. And, it has already reached several countries at this point, and specifically within those emerging markets that have leapfrogged the technology. So they're already in 5G networks, and being able to cater to those geographic segments is really interesting. Then you have trends like augmented reality, which are primarily driven on mobile, and we're seeing that develop. It's still quite nascent, but I'm definitely interested to see how that transpires, and it's a very exciting time. I think, people don't necessarily think of mobile as being like the most powerful or immersive experience, but going back to what Katie was alluding to with the metaverse. I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Well, thanks. You know what I'm thinking? I've got more questions to ask, but I keep seeing all these questions from the audiences that come up. And I was wondering if we wanted to ask some of them. So, Ashwini, how do you want to handle that? No, I'm sorry, Sumit.
Go for it. Go for it. We have 9 minutes. Let's take some questions from the chat.
So are you going to read them?
Sure.
Okay. And then feel free, whoever wants to jump in and answer it, feel free.
So we have Drew asking, as a hiring manager, what are some specific ways I can better market my job opportunities to underrepresented groups, and how can I better create a team culture that is conducive to supporting employees from diverse backgrounds once hired?
That's a good question, and I can start out answering that if you guys want me to take a shot at it. So a lot of that starts at the corporate level and not at the individual manager level, who the people posting the position. You know, organizations now are becoming more diverse and more inclusive and establishing things like the employee resource groups. And that's actually one of the hidden gems now within corporations, is these groups get involved with the community. They get involved with groups that are marketed specifically towards people of color, minorities, women. You know, I know our company has a Women in Tech ERG, and one of the things that we do is we are specifically looking at, you know, job fairs that focus on women in tech roles, or we're looking at supporting things like Code Coven, or, you know, Girls Who Code, or any of the organizations there. So I would say, as a hiring manager, your best opportunity is to tap into your internal groups, people who already have the inside line. The other thing I want to say is tap into your LinkedIn network. You know, it's at any given point, somebody in your LinkedIn network has already figured this out and has already got that direct line to some groups that you can work with. And reaching out to them is simple and easy.
Yeah, I would add one other thing as well, which is around the actual job description itself. The way that we write job descriptions can encourage people and discourage people depending on their demographics. And it's a very well-researched topic. So you can, you know, take a look at some of the scientific pieces that have been done around this. But they're basically, writing a job description needs to be neutral. You know, sometimes we tend to use gender words without even realizing, and that does discourage certain demographics to not apply. So there are companies out there that, you know, can look at a job description and help make sure it's neutralized so that it applies to every single type of person. The other thing is being really clear in your job description what your requirements are versus your desired requirements. Because again, based on women versus men, it's a very well-known thing that men will apply for a job that they're, you know, 60-70% qualified for, and a woman will not apply unless she feels she's 100% qualified. So it's really important as hiring managers that we are very clear about what our exact requirements are and what our desired requirements are. Because if we put too many things in the requirements, then women will not apply. If you move them down to desired or optional, or this would be, you know, a benefit, that is much better way to present the job requirements. So that's definitely something to bear in mind as you're writing the actual job description itself.
In terms of the second question, part of the question around how to create a team culture that's conducive to supporting employees from diverse backgrounds. Well, firstly, I echo everything that Leanne and Katie just said. Those were the exact responses regarding how to target people from underrepresented backgrounds. But yeah, for the second part of the question, I think the first step is to take an introspective look at your, you know, current team. And actually, one of the ways to do this is to conduct surveys and ask your team members about how they're feeling in the workplace. Do they feel that they're being supported? And then from there, you can gather that data, that feedback, and try and identify ways to improve. Something that we did at Square Enix, actually within my own team, was we hosted these bi-weekly informal conversations that were specifically related to diversity and inclusion topics. So we discussed things like microaggressions in the workplace, and everybody was invited to these discussions. And it was very interesting to see, you know, we had both allies. It wasn't just the people from diverse backgrounds that were in those conversations. And I think it's a very important step in terms of raising awareness and educating everybody around these topics. And it created a more supportive culture and a more united culture ultimately, because sometimes when people are perhaps not as open to diversity, or it's out of a lack of understanding. And I think we are quick to think that maybe it's not that, and that it's perhaps driven by more negative concepts, but it actually is just, it could be a lack of education, and that's definitely one of the important ways to address it.
You know, just a cliff note of one of the questions here, somebody said something about how is it that you can find time through your daily life with how busy you are to give back to the community, such as getting involved with Code Coven? Because I know people are so busy. Here was a producer in a game studio in Brazil saying, you know, you're actually taking your energy and making a difference. How do you do that? Anyone want to take that on?
Yeah,
Sure,
I can start. I was going to say, and then I was just, I definitely want to hear about Karla and Leanne, because I can learn something from them. But I think some of it goes back, to like our desire to leave, to leave the world in a better place than where we found it. And if we don't take that time, if we don't carve out time in our own schedules to give back, whether it's volunteering with things like Code Coven, or, my daughter and I volunteer with a horse rescue, we have to make that time and that opportunity, because what we're doing is then bringing the next generation into it. People are seeing that we're able to do that. They're seeing that we make the time, and that's going to encourage more of that behavior as we go forward.
Perfect.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then also one of the ways that I personally approach it is just through my values. I think we sometimes try and just fit everything into the circle we have, and that generally splits into work and life, but there are many other pieces of that pie. And so I think about, like, what are the values that drive me in life? I want to provide mentorship. I want to support people trying to get into the industry, because I think about when I was getting into the industry and I didn't have that support, and I want to provide that to people that haven't that need that. So for me, it's all values based. It's like, where do I want to have an impact, like Katie is saying, and where should we leave that and help people? And then when you look at the things that you're passionate about and the things that are important to you in your life, and then you have to, carve out that pie to be focused on your values and your priority. Some things have to drop off, right? They do. Like, we can't do everything. So
it's all about your force. Got to find it and then figure out how to around it, right?
I always use this metaphor at work, which is, we have a bunch of balls that we're holding. We have glass balls, rubber balls, plastic balls, and crystal balls. And the crystal ball probably should never drop, but you can probably drop a couple of rubber balls, right? Because they'll be fine. So I always use that analogy of, like, all the things you have in your life, prioritize them by what type of ball they are, and your crystal ball should be the one that you spend a bunch of your time on.
I love that. Thanks. Hey, Sumit, did you want to wrap up today?
Sure. Such an inspiring session. Karla, Katie, Leanne, thank you for sharing your views. Your personal stories, I'm sure, inspired people not just in Bombay, but Brazil as well. We will be sharing with each one of our attendees who joined a link where you can donate for COVID-19 affected families, and also update you on the relief work that we are doing. So once again, thank you very much for such an interesting and exciting, insightful session. And please stay safe, stay healthy, and pray for India.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.